Bueno, buenos días. Good morning to the speakers that we have in Madrid and Australia. My name is Maria Laura. I'm the person in charge of promotional activities and Andalucia Trades External Network. I'm going to do a brief introduction to this presentation. I'm going to do it in Spanish, and then I will give the floor to the first speaker. Bueno, Andalucía Trade es una nueva agencia que se constituye en Andalucía para la promoción de las empresas, una promoción 360 grados que va desde la financiación hasta el apoyo en internacionalización, pasando por actividades de innovación y de investigación. Hoy contamos con nosotros aquí en esta presentación con Alberto Tubella, que es el jefe de proyecto de Andalucía Trade en Australia. Él va a hacernos una introducción sobre el mercado. Tenemos también a dos ponentes, a Emile Gómez, que es fundador de Nomad Distribution, y tenemos también a Cowper, que es CEO de ShopGrok. Antes de darles la palabra a ellos, queríamos un poco situar en contexto cuáles son las relaciones comerciales entre Andalucía y Australia. Las exportaciones andaluzas a Australia en el año 2023 rozaron los 188 millones de euros, que eso supuso un 7,6% más que en el año 2022, y es prácticamente la mitad de las exportaciones, prácticamente la mitad de este volumen de exportaciones las aportó el sector agroalimentario. Esto constituyó una cifra de 96,2 millones de euros. Uno de los motivos por los que estamos organizando esta jornada técnica sobre el sector agroalimentario precisamente es por la importancia y el peso que tienen dentro del total de las exportaciones andaluzas a este país. ¿Cuáles son los productos más representados dentro de esta cesta de productos agroalimentarios? Bueno, pues como en muchos otros países, el monoproducto más exportado por Andalucía, y en este caso se vuelve a repetir esa circunstancia, es el relacionado con las grasas y aceites. En el año 23, las exportaciones alcanzaron los 81 millones de euros. Con la intención de mantener esta tasa de liderazgo y aprovechar este posicionamiento, nosotros desde Andalucía Trade estamos organizando una visita prospectiva y una misión comercial directa a la feria Fine Food Australia, que se celebra del 2 al 6 de septiembre de este año 2024. Esta es una feria en la que en la antigua Extenda y ahora en Andalucía Trade venimos participando desde hace más de 15 años. O sea que es una feria conocida por nosotros, donde la presencia española y andaluza siempre ha tenido un papel. Además de la visita a la feria, nuestra intención es realizar agendas en Brisbane o en Sydney, dependiendo un poco del interés que vayan demostrando los importadores australianos. La convocatoria que estoy mencionando está abierta hasta el viernes que viene. Por lo tanto, aquellas empresas que estéis presentes en esta jornada y que aún no os hayáis inscrito, espero que como resultado de todas las oportunidades que nos van a trasladar los ponentes que nos acompañan hoy, pues contrastéis el interés del mercado y os animéis a apuntaros. Una muy brevísima reseña del sector agroalimentario, porque no quiero entrar en el terreno ni de Alberto, ni de Emile, ni de Aaron, una muy breve reseña del sector agroalimentario. Deciros que el sector agroalimentario es un sector interesante para las empresas en Australia, porque este es un país que tiene una sólida economía, tanto por el crecimiento de su economía como por el crecimiento de la población. Destaca la amplia base de consumidores de origen multicultural, que se identifica con una marcada predilección por los productos de alta calidad. Yo tuve la ocasión de estar en Australia hace ya esos 15 años, esos más de 15 años, y ya en aquel momento el sector agroalimentario era un sector puntero en el que, bueno, pues de la mano de cocineros de reconocido prestigio a nivel internacional, ellos han ido poniendo su seña de identidad en todo el mundo. Estos consumidores que estamos comentando valoran una serie de aspectos principalmente: la innovación, la calidad y la diversidad en sus experiencias culinarias. Además, el auge de la dieta mediterránea unido al creciente interés por la gastronomía española está potenciando la demanda de ingredientes y productos procesados de origen español. Los efectos de la pandemia, así como la ralentización del consumo por el efecto inflacionario, han sido contrarrestados por el sector con el impulso de nuevos canales de distribución, evitando así la concentración que se da en el canal tradicional de supermercados. Vais a tener ocasión ahora de conocer un poco cuál es ese mapa de la distribución en Australia y cuáles son las particularidades de estos nuevos actores que están apareciendo en la escena gastronómica y alimentaria de este país. Destacan importadores especializados en comida étnica, el canal de delicatessen, almacenistas con venta online. Lo que es importante es que todas estas vías ofrecen buenas oportunidades de entrada al país para productos de las siguientes categorías. No son los únicos que tienen oportunidades, pero son productos que sí están teniendo una predominancia especial. Los productos ecológicos, los productos saludables, productos con denominación de origen y insumos tanto para minoristas como para mayoristas. Como decía al principio, nos acompañan hoy Emile Gómez, fundador de Nomad Distribution. Thank you very much, Emile, for being here with us today. We also have Aaron Cowper, who is CEO of ShopGrok. We've sent the links to your websites to the companies that are here with us, so they've had a chance to see what both of you do. And also we have here Alberto Tubella, who is the chief of the project Andalucia Trade in Australia. That's all on my behalf. It was just to set the ground for you to take the floor. I think the first person to speak now is Alberto, if I'm not wrong. So thank you very much, Alberto.
Thank you very much, Maria. Well, I'm glad you didn't overstep, but you just said all the main points. Well, just a very brief introduction from my side because I'm not feeling very well, so I apologize in advance if I start coughing or something. Just a brief history of what Australia is. I mean, Australia is a very young country. We said that is 250 years old, and obviously the background from the origins was British. That was reflected in the way of living, that was reflected in the way of eating. But that changed very much last century, especially after the migration during the 50s and the 60s, with a lot of migration from European countries, especially two to mention that are Greece and Italy. And later on, and especially on the city centers, we find a lot of Asian countries migration. So in a very brief space of 30 years, the food and beverage market has changed a lot due to the influence of these communities. As you mentioned before, Mediterranean diet is really very, very trendful here in Australia, especially pushed by the Italians and the Greeks. You were mentioning the oil. Obviously, these two countries are very big in oil, so they are the ones who promoted the oil in Australia and the ones who are still pushing for it. But we have to take into consideration that Spain is the main producer, so there are a lot of opportunities there as well. Okay. One of the most difficult things to understand about the Australian market is the ways where the food is distributed. For here, we have Aaron, that he's going to give us an oversight of how this panorama is and how the influence of the big supermarkets, especially when we are talking B2C, have in the Australia panorama. But let's not forget that there are also a B2B business where Emile has a lot of influence and a lot of things to tell us about. So if we will start with Aaron. Aaron is the CEO of ShopGrok. It's a company that supports food companies to place their products in the market. Especially, he's an expert in terms of pricing and how do you call it, and allocation. Sorry, the positioning of the products in terms of pricing and promotion. And he worked for Woolworths, which is one of the big supermarkets and one of the big players in Australia. So he has some insights on that as well. Thank you very much, Aaron. Your turn.
Thanks, Alberto. Great to be here, and thanks for having me join. I'll just try to share my screen and let me know if you can see it. You seeing my screen now?
All good.
Yep. Okay. All right, great. Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I'll probably talk for about 15 minutes or so, and then I'll leave time for questions. So I'm planning to provide just an introduction to myself and a brief intro to my company, ShopGrok, and then I'll talk a little bit about Australian consumer preferences and some trends that I've seen in the Australian market of recent times. And then talk a little bit about the food ecosystem in Australia. So both the retail ecosystem in terms of the major supermarkets and other retail outlets, and then a little bit about the wholesale market. And then I'm sure Emile can provide more information than me about that side of the market. And then maybe some opportunities for Spanish products in Australia based on some of the data that we have within my company. So I'll move on to the introduction. So as mentioned, I used to work at Woolworths, which is Australia's largest supermarket. I was the head of price strategy and price analytics there, so that was over 5 years ago. But since then, I've started a company called ShopGrok, and we support retailers and consumer brands and suppliers with market data to help them make better decisions around pricing and product range. So we collect a lot of data from the web and from other data sources, and then we map that data and process it, and we have a set of dashboards that we provide to our customers to help them make better decisions around pricing and assortment and other parts of the retail process. So yeah, other than my Woolworths background, I was previously in management consulting, mainly in the pricing space, and my connection to Spain is well, I'm here in Madrid right now, actually, with my family to help expand my business and spend some time here with the family. But I also completed my MBA here in Madrid at El Instituto de Empresa about 12 years ago. So yeah, have really love being in Spain and try to come back when I can. So yeah, in terms of the companies that we work for at ShopGrok, we have a broad range of companies from lots of different retail sectors. So sectors like outdoor retail and automotive and DIY or hardware. But then we also have liquor, so beer and wine, and then some customers like Woolworths in the retail food and grocery space. So we cover all retail sectors, and we have a lot of data, historical data going back several years in all of these sectors. So can use that data to help retailers get insights about what's happening in the sector. So just some information about Australia as a whole. So it's known as being a fairly culturally diverse country. We have about 30% of the population that was born overseas, and which is high when you compare to the OECD average. In terms of European immigration, we have a very large Italian and Greek community in Australia, as well as German community, which has increased since the World War II era. And with that immigration, we've had a lot of import of European food, particularly Mediterranean food, pastas, pizza, and olive oil, as mentioned. And so Australia has a strong interest in European food products and gourmet and specialty foods. So that continues to grow. Currently, in terms of Spanish heritage, from the figures I could find, about 1 in every 2,000 Australians now has some sort of Spanish heritage, one or both parents or grandparent. So that also is growing, and so interest in Spanish, particularly Spanish heritage foods, is continuing to grow. And some other, I guess, information about the Australian eating habits. Very high consumption of meat. We have the 3rd highest meat consumption per capita in the world, behind the USA and Hong Kong. So particularly, lamb and beef, barbecuing is very popular. But deli meats and small goods are also a big part of that meat consumption. But also, I guess there is also a trend towards health conscious eating. So customers are looking for kind of paddock to plate or kind of organic, sustainable, gluten-free, plant-based type products, and also looking for particular provenance of products and knowing where the product comes from and having authentic product from the source. So yeah, you can see there, as far as Spanish, ancestry, that there is a good broad, the averages are similar across the different states of Australia. So New South Wales being the largest state, has the largest Spanish population. As far as the food ecosystem, so I've sort of there's two slides here. So the first slide will be on the retail ecosystem, and then I've got another slide on sort of the wholesale or food service ecosystem. So in terms of retail, the market is quite concentrated in Australia. So there are two major supermarkets, Woolworths and Coles, and they have roughly 50% share of fresh food in Australia. So the figures on the left here is because it's just fresh food. It won't include canned food and long life food, but in those categories, the percentages will actually be even higher for the two major supermarkets. So you can see, Woolworths and Coles have a very large share. Then Aldi, who would know, the German retailer, have about a 10% share. And then we have several large, like smaller supermarket chains across Australia. So IGA, that you can see there, the Independent Grocers of Australia, are a chain of independent grocers, so a franchise kind of model. And some of those are owned by a parent wholesale company called Metcash, which will be on the next slide. But a lot of them are independently owned, and they can choose their own range to put into their stores, or they can buy it through various wholesalers. So that is potentially a channel to market for Spanish retailers. And then there are a few other larger chains of supermarkets. So Harris Farm is primarily in New South Wales, Foodland is primarily in South Australia, and Foodworks is a national chain as well. That is also a separate group of independent retailers that have their own franchise stores. Then there is a pretty large sector of convenience retailers, retailers like 7-Eleven and Easy Mart, and then you have the petrol or fuel kind of service stations who also have usually a convenience offering. They may have certain dried meat products and things like that they sell within the store. And then, last but not least, I guess the delicatessen and small goods sector is an important one, I think, for Spanish importers, because a lot of those products will sit within that sector. It looks small on the chart on the left, but is still roughly $1 billion market for within Australia. So some of the larger deli brands noted there, Simon Johnson and Blackwattle are two of the larger ones, but they're also big markets in each of the capital cities of Australia. So Queen Victoria Market is a big one in Victoria. Adelaide Central Market is a big one in South Australia, and within those markets you have providors and small goods and deli retailers who will source their own product to sell in those markets. So that potentially is another channel for Spanish products. In terms of the wholesale market, you have a mix of importers and distributors of food product, which is a fairly large industry, about $100 billion Australian dollar industry. You then have some food service providers who would supply the likes of hospital, education, some corporate, and also the cafe and restaurant industry. And so there's a mix of providers in that space, but some of the larger ones are shown on the right hand side. So in terms of some of the bigger names, Metcash is a large, one of the probably the largest wholesaler conglomerate within Australia. They do things other than food and grocery, but in the food and grocery space, they supply most of the IGA supermarkets, which I mentioned on the last slide, and then they also wholesale to lots of other food service and other retailers and B2B food providers in Australia. They recently acquired Superior Food Services, which is another food service provider. And then you have some other food service providers like Bid Food and PFD, who are also generally providing food to catering or hospitality or education, etc. And then you go down to like you have some large restaurant chains who are doing their own buying and potentially importing of food. So Merivale is one of the larger restaurant chains in Australia. They have well over 50 venues around Australia. So they're sourcing product to put into all of their different restaurants and venues. And then on top of that, you have quite a number of Spain-specific importers and distributors. I'm sure Emile will be able to talk more to that. His company is mentioned there, Nomad. But in terms of ones I was found in my research, there's a few listed there. And I've got an appendix with a more detailed list that I'm happy to provide at the end of the session if anybody would like to see that list. Yeah, lots of opportunities there, I suppose, for ways to enter the Australian market. And if you look at trade in general between Australia and Spain, it continues to grow, and the bulk of that trade is actually food and beverage product. So you can see it's pretty steady growth trajectory over the past 20 years. And the major food imports, the biggest one would be olive oil, and olive oil. So Spanish olive oil is actually the largest. Spain is the largest importer of olive oil to Australia, and in fact, I think the Spanish import of olive oil is larger than the domestic production of olive oil. So it's an important import for Australia. But there are lots of other Spanish products that are being imported, including Spanish wines, cheeses, cured meats, etc. So definitely a lot of demand for Spanish products within the Australian market. As an example, just looking at olive oil in particular, you can see there olive imports to Australia. You can see Spain is by far the biggest importer, Italy and Greece being the other two next biggest importers. And so Spain is importing close to 30,000 tonnes per year to Australia, and that the local industry is producing up to maybe 20,000 tonnes per year. So as I said, it's an important import for Australia. One of the things that we've seen recently, and it's a big topic in Australia, political issue, is price inflation on food, and I guess in olive oil in particular, there's been significant price increases. I'm sure you would be aware over the past couple of years, mainly driven, I think, by supply issues, and so we've seen prices of the retail price of Spanish or all olive oils increasing. So you can see there a couple of the Coles. Coles is one of the supermarkets I mentioned, but two of the olive oils that they range, you can see they've increased by 30 or 40% on a per litre basis over the past couple of years. So it's definitely a topic of conversation in Australia at the moment around cost of living and price inflation. So this will be the last slide. So just thinking about ways in which you could think about entering Australia, and I'm sure Emile will have more specific experience in this area. But certainly industry festivals and conferences, which the team on the call have spoken about through the missions that the trade missions that they're running and similar events. And I think that certainly the delicatessen and gourmet food store channel is a big one, and then there are lots of importers and distributors of Spanish products that you could certainly look to work with. An interesting channel that is also worth mentioning is the marketplace channel. So the major supermarkets and a lot of other players like Amazon and a few others out there now have a marketplace offering in addition to the core range. So Woolworths has their own range, where they source the product directly and stock it in their warehouse, but they also have now a marketplace where they will bring on product from third-party suppliers who will sell the product and ship the product themselves, but they still make it available via the Woolworths website. So it's a good way to get some exposure for your product potentially, and if the product does well, it could be then moved into the core range of that retailer over time. So one of the importers that I noticed, which was pretty prominent on the Woolworths website, is Rodriguez Brothers. So they have on their own website, they have about 1,000 Spanish products for sale, but they're now selling around 185 products via the Woolworths Everyday Marketplace, and some of the Spanish brands that are selling through that marketplace are mentioned there, are covering lots of different categories, including cheese and olives and small goods, etc. So certainly lots of examples of success of Spanish brands penetrating the Australian market. And I wish everyone on the call very well in increasing trade with Australia. So that's it for me. I'm happy to, as I mentioned, I've got a list here of different retailers and importers that I've found, and also a list of links. I'm happy to share this after the call if anyone would like to have a read. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Aaron, so much. I mean, that was a fantastic overview of the distribution panorama in Australia. I guess important to notice the difference between direct to consumer and through other distributors. I gotta mention that there's a Spanish community that is present in Australia. It might be small in relation to the numbers of other communities, but they're very active. So there's a lot of single players, sole traders, what we call autonomous, that they import 2-3 products, no more, but they specialize in those products and they try to promote those products. And that's also a good way to enter the market. It's difficult to find them. And obviously, because they are so specialized, they have enough offer already, but you never know. Those are the ones also to approach. And now I will pass the word to Emile. Emile, as it was commented before, is the founder and CEO of Nomad Distribution. Emile combines importing products from Spain with manufacturing them here in Australia. He has his own brand, La Boqueria, which for the ones who are from Barcelona like myself, it really is a fantastic name. Emile is gonna talk to us about his activity and what are the challenges that the Spanish exporters find here in Australia. Thank you, Emile.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto. Hello, everyone. Good morning. The difference, I suppose, the difference between myself and my company and Aaron is that I'm just able to actually share with you a very specific thoroughfare in which to enter the Australian market. Nomad Distribution is about 20 years old. We began importing solely Spanish products. We wanted to extend our range and broaden the offer, and because of that, because of our inability to import salamis or any fermented products, we began with small goods, and that's the bulk of our manufacturing in Australia is products which we are not able to import. Any of those small goods, anything that's fermented, anything that's air dried that is not a jamón or a paleta, we have to manufacture in Australia. Apart from that, the range that we specialize in is solely and wholly a Spanish range. I'll just tell you some of the products that we've actually found success in and that have grown considerably in acceptance in Australia is the jamones, jamón serrano and jamón ibérico. They were They were an oddity when the permits were offered into Australia, but now they compete. They're in the same range as a prosciutto. Each restaurant that's worth their salt, whether they're Spanish or whether they're just an Australian restaurant or a Mediterranean restaurant, will have both of those hams on offer. Jamón Ibérico also has grown. What else do we have? We import from La Hoguera. They do a fantastic jamón serrano. Ibérico comes from Julián Martín. Then we do anchovies from Don Bocarte. We have vinegars from Videsan. We have olives from Losada. Felix Reverte does our pimentón. Antonio Tomás and Calaspara do our rice. We do cheeses from Galmesan from up north, and HM from Hola Manchegos, and Quince from Emile Quince. So our range has become quite broad. We specialize mostly in food service. This is where our basic growth was. We started with solely and wholly Spanish restaurants and restaurants that wanted to have a European feel. But from 20 years ago to today is basically the bulk of our clients are not Spanish restaurants. The bulk of our clients are standard restaurants. The offer that Italians were giving to food service, which was a range of products that most restaurants had to have, now in that mix is Spanish goods. Spanish goods, everyone has got to have a manchego. Everyone's got to have a jamón in there. Everyone has to have some piquillo peppers. Everyone actually has to have the fundamentals that make Spanish cuisine. Food service was the main force into introducing I suppose the taste to Spanish food. It began in a restaurant, and then from a restaurant it moved to a retail store, and it is that entry that has made, I suppose, Spanish food now a common day fare. You'll find it in most delicatessens. You'll find it in most small chains and larger chains. Specific Spanish-specific products, not just products from Spain. Let me just. The retail chains that we began with are very different to the retail chains that we have today. We sell some of our products to Harris Farm. We sell products to Simon Johnson. So our offer is now one that is broader and has reached just the basis of retail. The high end products, the Mojama, the Jamón Ibérico, the Gran Reserva jamones, all of that is still primarily into high-end delicatessens and more exclusive deli offers. But a standard jamón, you'll find a standard jamón in, I would say, just about any medium supermarket, small chain supermarket, Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, and varied range of pricing. As you move away from the majors, you end up having a much better quality. You go from Cava to a Serrano to a Reserva to a Gran Reserva, and you're moving away from the major retailers like Coles and Woolies and Aldi's to a smaller retailer like Blackwattle Deli, like Simon Johnson. I suppose the main challenges that you will face in exporting to Australia is not only because of the difference in prices due to transport. That obviously has increased considerably. We've seen huge increases during COVID, and it has come down a little bit. But I mean, the challenges are more on transit time, because we have to be responsive to the market. Our response time was about 45 days more or less on the water, plus 2 weeks prior, organizing the orders, and then 1 week clearing in Australia. Now that's blown out to sometimes 70, 80, 90 days, which means that you're looking at about 100 days worth of forecasting on how the market is going to react. That is one of the most challenging in having continuity of stock, continuity of range, and also seeing that Australia sort of ebbs and flows in orders. For example, our rice sales tends to peak at a certain time, which is not really controllable. So therefore, we can't really forecast the volumes that we have to carry. We have to respond. And because you're talking 100, 120 days worth of response, then it is a fairly difficult. Then the other challenge is obviously the legislation. The import conditions that have to be maintained so that you can actually export to Australia are quite complex. The varied permits that have to be required, the increasing legislation problems, the issue that we're having at the moment with exporting cheeses from Spain, the fact that you can't export raw milk cheeses at the moment, seeing that we've had the pox, and therefore Spain is still within the list. So the challenges, the legal challenges are there. They're surmountable because we've moved then into pasteurized milks, and the acceptance in Australia on Spanish cheeses is quite high. The issue that we have is that the entry on the product quality of, let's pick, for example, I think one thing that we have to become fairly clear on how it is to grow a market in Australia, maintain the market, and maintain also a value offer in the market. Manchego, fundamental cheese. You know, it is Spain's, you know, the jamón manchego. Those are the two items that one must have. Manchego prior COVID and prior the milk increases was continuously growing and gaining strength. Not only gaining strength in sales, but gaining strength in kudos. In other words, it was considered and respected as a cheese. So to maintain that ground, to maintain the ethos of what Manchego stands for, is maintaining, number one, quality and supply. There has been some up and downs on the quality delivery of Manchego. There's been some different methods of curing the cheese, which has made it inferior. So therefore, that has maintained one thing, that has kept the cheese on the shelves and the cheese able to actually be sold because the price has been contained. But because the second equation, which is quality, is one which has been degraded, the strength and power of just that brand has been diminished. And I think that's one thing that we've got to remember, that it is very hard to establish. It takes a long time to establish, but it takes one season for you to completely diminish a brand. And that is one of the challenges now, that we have price increases on certain things. We have price increases in rice, in olive oil, in the milk that goes into making Manchego. And those challenges should really be considered as a long-term maintaining market and maintaining the strength that we have developed here for the brands, for these brands. We're growing. Nomad, our company, is growing year in, year out, even through COVID, on certain lines of products which are only Spanish products. And so there is a demand for that, but the demand for that can actually quickly be eroded if we take away quality for the purpose of just maintaining price point. That relationship has to be very finely tuned. Then I guess the other thing that needs to be considered is how do you develop and how do you export to Australia? The only recommendation that I can give you is our personal experience. We have a range of companies that we work solely and wholly in Spain that are 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 20 years old. We developed a relationship, and that relationship has gone through strength and growth and all of the ups and downs, but we have been the channel into Australia, and those companies have grown with us. The only way that I see it is a really strong relationship with an importing company, is a relationship in which there is trust and support from both sides. There is a marketing strength. It's an importer that has reach all throughout Australia, not only regionally, because even though Australia is a large country, the distributors have a reach on every of the states. For example, if there is a large importer that brings in 2 containers of rice in South Australia, then I will fill it in New South Wales if it is exactly the same rice. If someone runs out of jamon in WA, an importer, I will fill it in New South Wales, because any medium to large size importer has already a distribution channel throughout Australia. Most of my sub distributors are all in key states, and so it's actually, that is quite active. So the relationship that you have with your importer and the choice that you make there is one that should, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that if you dilute your offer, if you have 2 or 3 distributors that you choose as channels in Australia, it will not render you 3 times the sales. It will render you 1 time the sales with 3 times the work. What else can I tell you? I mean, the other thing that there was a comment there from Alberto is whether we choose to import as a white brand, a brand that is branded our name, Nomad Distribution. I don't think our ethos is that origin, authenticity, and respect to where the product comes from is part of the commercial value. Aaron was talking about paddock to the store. That is the idea. It is a origin from Spain. The brand itself, the history behind the brand, is sometimes as important as how the brand or what it tastes like or how it can be used. The history of it has the same value, the same marketing value as anything else. It is in par with it. So I wouldn't think. I think that you guys should keep your brand. market yourself, tell your history, and make good product. And I think that is the strongest marketing tool you have. I think that's it. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to elaborate any further.
Thank you so much, Emile. That was very, very clarifying. I totally agree with you that in this industry, you need to align with one partner and just bet on it and support it the more than you can. So the selection of the partner is the key factor in order to enter the market. Obviously, depending on the type of company, depending on the type of product, the decision of the white label or not is critical, but I think that's case by case. I mean, it's not the same comparing someone that sells, for example, olive oil in bulk than one that comes here with bottled olive oil. So it's case by case, but both possibilities are here for sure. I think there are some questions in the chat. If Javier can address it to us, please.
The first question is regarding the wine importers of premium natural wines without sulfites. Are they different as the channel of to come in? Is a company called Bodega Chats, which is very strong in those markets as well.
Well, that's a tough one because it's very, very specific, the product. Gotta say that the alcohol rules in Australia are quite particular. They are an inheritance of the former British Empire, if you want, and they have not evolved that much. So it's quite weird to deal with alcohol. Obviously, you need a license to import alcohol. The alcohol, for example, is not sold in supermarkets. They are sold in bottle shops, as they call it. That would be a licoreria. Obviously, the supermarkets, they have their own bottle shops attached to the supermarket, so you can do it, but it's an independent shop to the supermarket. And I wouldn't know if there is a difference between a wine with sulfites or without sulfites. I would say that the importers are the same, but this is something that we would have to look into it if there is a specific specialization in that regard. I don't really know. I don't know if my colleagues know anything about it. It's quite specific.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know specifically on that example, but certainly the retail market for liquor in Australia is also quite concentrated. There are a couple of large retailers who dominate in Australia. The largest one is called Dan Murphy's, and they probably have the largest wine range within Australia, and they're owned by a parent company called Endeavour Group. They actually used to be part of the Woolworths Group, and they recently split off about 3 or 4 years ago. They have their own vertically integrated wineries, so they have a lot of their own range, especially at the kind of entry level price point range. They grow a lot of their own wines, and then they purchase the others from suppliers. And I think, yeah, I think the price point for wine in Australia tends to be higher certainly than here in Spain, due to the excise taxes and import taxes that are on the wine. So I think in terms of import, it tends to be the more premium wines that do better in terms of import. But I'm certainly not the expert in that space.
In fact, since you mentioned the taxes, excuse me, it's important to understand that Australia does not have signed a free trade agreement with Europe. New Zealand has recently signed, but in Australia, the main issue to finalize this trade agreement is the food industry, and a question of the names of the denomination. Since there is such a large population related to Italy, to Greece, they want to use their own names. They consider that they are Greeks, that they are Italians, they are in Australia. Obviously, they are binationals, but that they have the right to use those names. That, of course, if it stays like that, that would mean that anyone could use also the Spanish names. And in fact, they do. I mean, we have seen many times in the supermarket and even at the trade shows, wide in the open, that you grab a piece of manchego cheese and it says made in Australia or even made in Greece. I mean, there's no control over those names around here, and this is one of the issues that is stopping the whole free trade agreement. That means that so far, all the food industry from Europe is charged with an average of 5% taxes, I believe. But I mean, I wouldn't say that's the critical thing, the taxes itself, because obviously your competitor is suffering exactly the same thing. But the fact of the denominations of origin, that's quite important, because you are finding that you try to promote your own area and someone has taken your name here in Australia, and that's quite important.
Correct.
There is another question, this one for Aaron. In your presentation, you said that you mentioned that government inquiry into possible pricing going by the supermarket. Question is, does this affect to any particular product range, or it is across the board product? Thank you.
Yeah, it's been across the board. I think it's yeah, so it's come out of a government inquiry into you know, I think basically cost of living has become a major issue in Australia. I think also, you know, worldwide at the moment, inflation all around the world, and I think the government in Australia was wanted to be seen to be doing something to try to combat the rising cost of goods, and so there has been an inquiry into potential price gouging by the supermarkets. The inquiry one of the inquiries just finished up, and they're awaiting responses from the supermarkets. There's been some suggestions put forward by the inquiry as to things that they should do, things like having more formalized terms of agreement with suppliers, and potentially have the power to break up the larger supermarket chains if they get too large and have too much market power. I don't think they found any particular evidence of price gouging as such, as in inflating the price beyond what would be considered kind of a normal margin. So it was definitely across the whole range. So it wasn't particular to imported product or anything like that. In fact, it's probably more on the products sold from Australian suppliers to the public.
Thank you, Aaron. Is there any specific regulation regarding the labeling of recycling of plastic containers? You know about?
I'm sorry.
The question is if there is any specific regulation about the labeling, and if there's any specific regulation about recycling plastic containers.
The fact of old packaging and the recycling, there is a move from the food industry where in 2025 they aim to actually have most of small good packaging and most bulk food packaging being recyclable, and that part of it is I don't think it's set in stone, but it is the objective by 2025. But the other question was regarding general labeling or food labeling.
Yep.
There is a huge complexity on food labeling. Food labeling and general labeling is very specific. It's governed by a set of rules and laws that stipulate a whole bunch of complexities on percentages, for example, a name of a product. If the name of the product names, for example, if it was chili sauce, you would have to have a percentile on the descriptive saying the amount of chili. So the rules are quite complex, but they're actually very, very easy to maneuver through the food standards, which happen to be 300 and something pages. But for the food standards, you can maneuver your way into ending up with a legal labeling. You cannot enter the country Well, actually, you can enter the country but not bring it to sale if the labeling is not correct. So border security will allow it in, but food standards, IFIS, will not allow for you to actually put it in retail.
Yeah, this company, in fact,
we see. Sorry, it's cutting out, Javier, and we have some noise in the background as well.
Yeah, sorry about it. It's natural mineral water.
Sorry, when clarifying about the labeling, I believe I'm not 100% sure, but I think the labeling needs to be in English. and I'm saying is that I'm not sure 100% because especially if it goes to
100 million%.
But I mean, what you find in the supermarket, especially the Asian supermarkets, sometimes it's difficult to see if that's English or not. But in any case, it's quite common here that the distributor adds something to the label, just a sticker or something, just to comply with the local norm. That might be maybe only indicating the name of the importer that has to be on the label of the food product, because the importer is the last responsible person on Australian territory, or as Emile mentioned, the nutrition facts, etc. That depends on the product you are selling. Though again, I'm a little bit skeptic that everybody fulfills with that rule, but the serious ones they do, obviously.
No, yeah. The issue is not whether you comply or not, because I mean, if you bring a container of 17 different products, you may be pulled up by 3 products. Those 3 products will be looked at for labeling and maybe tested in the lab. The rest of the products are not, so you can actually distribute those. That's all well and good, but what happens if you get an inspector come through? The first is a standard warning, which I think is just a standard warning. The second is a $20,000 fine. And then after that, they pull all your products up. It actually escalates, and then you're not able to import any more products if you are the importer. So even though you're allowed to, but Chinatown is, I can't comment on what happens there, but I've seen it. But as a legal norm, this is what you have to do. And the fines are quite substantial if you actually get caught twice without remediation. Huh?
All right.
There's also standards on if you're claiming Spain as country of origin, which I assume you would want to. I think you need to provide evidence of that as well, and in order to be able to claim that the product is Spanish on the label. But there's quite some information if you go to the there's a labeling standards, foodstandards.gov.au has a lot of information about the food standards and requirements.
Thanks, Aaron. If you don't mind to write this address on the chat, it will be very useful for that. Thank you. And what about specific certification for labeling for olive oil? Are there any?
It is not specific. It is just standard labeling for olive oil. You must have, just like any regulation, you must have the content, you must have the origin, you must have the NIP, the nutritional information in it, and the importer. It is not a specific regulation. It is the labeling regulation is applied to all products in the same manner.
And we've got also a question concerning your experience, maybe for perishable products from Spain.
Right.
Are they sent by sea or by air? What's your experience?
Both. It's basically saying that anytime that you transport anything by air, the charge is volumetric. So therefore, it is not in relation to only one thing, to its weight, but also to its volume. The value for volume has to be of some high degree. We bring the majority of our goods. We bring those by sea. All the jamon and all the cheeses we bring by sea. There is no cheeses that we bring in with a shorter shelf life than 9 months shelf life. So that restrains what you can do, but it also controls the cost. The cost per kilo can actually be quite important lately. It used to be somewhere around €2.87 plus the entry cost and the exit cost out of Spain. Now you could even add €8. You know, the last emergency air freight that we did, I think it was €7.50 plus entry and exit per kilo on top of the item. So the item has to be of value to start off, but short shelf life, low value. I don't think this is why you find actually a constraint of that range of products in Australia, seeing that we're so far away, and then you consume most of your shelf life just on the water. If you can't really afford to add those those €4, €5, €6 a kilo on the product and be competitive.
We have no more question on the chat now. I apologize for the sound of my connection. So that's why Paula is gonna close the webinar. She's gonna be much better. Estás sin micro, Paula, creo.
No.
So maybe it's me. It's going to be closing them. Well, thank you very much to you guys. It was, I think, a very, very practical information about the Australian market for agri, even for the distribution or the typical import from Spain. I will remind all the people that we got open the call for a trade mission to Australia in the first week of September, same time as Fine Food Melbourne show, and after all the information we had here, I think it's an opportunity to get into the market and to see by our own eyes the result of the market there. I don't know if you want to say something else for closing, or we just finish the webinar. Thanking you again your participation.
Well, thank you so much to the speakers. It's been fantastic, the different views that they had from two very different point of views. Oops, sorry about that. I really believe it was a perfect overview what the companies needed just to have a first view on the Australian market and if they can approach it or not. The trade delegation is open to register, so please contact Javier regarding that. And thanks, Aaron, once again. Thanks, Emile, for staying late. I know it's 6 o'clock here, already past dinner time, so I really, really appreciate it. But I'm sure your food is going to be much better than mine tonight, so I'm not worried about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Paula.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Muchas gracias a todos también por participar. Espero que haya sido útil para vuestras empresas. Se ha grabado y enviaremos a continuación las presentaciones, la grabación y un pequeño cuestionario de valoración para que nos digáis vuestros comentarios. Muchas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.